Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today for this session of Succeeding at SBIR, focused on the NIH SBIR STTR program, presented by Mr. J.P. Kim. J.P. Kim is an NIH SBIR STTR program manager. In addition to J.P.'s duties under the NIH programs, which include special expertise on SBIR IP issues, J.P. has over 30 years of experience working with patents and other intellectual property matters for businesses, universities, and other organizations. JP also has worked as a researcher at private companies and in the academic sector, as well as at national, international, and local intellectual property law firms, working on patent, trademark, copyright, and international trade matters. Now, before we get started, I'd like to ask that everyone please keep their microphones muted, and if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box and we will answer them during the Q&A session at the end. So at this point, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, JP.
Thank you very much, Alyssa. Good morning, wherever you are, or good afternoon, I should say. Welcome everyone to Succeeding at SBIR STTR with NIH here. And I am J.P. Kim. As Alyssa noted, I'm a program manager here at the NIH in the Office of Extramural Research. So why don't we get started? So from the first slide, you can see the agenda, what we're going to talk about today. So this is basically a roadmap of our discussion. We're going to first talk about the SBIR STTR program overview. Then we'll talk about program specifics. Then we'll give you a background on the reauthorization updates. Then we'll talk about solicitation and funding opportunities. In other words, where to find the opportunities. Then we'll discuss the NIH peer review process, transitioning to the marketplace, and finally we'll have a Q&A at the end. All right? So why don't we get started? Next. Thanks. So the most important piece of advice and most important walkaway today would be actually to talk to a program officer about your application and to submit early. As you see, it says days, not hours, not minutes before, but of course, very early. One of the reasons for that is actually there are 5 registrations that are required to apply for an SBIR or STTR application, and it can take actually 6 to 8 weeks to complete all those registrations. So you should be aware of that and make certain you start all the registrations early. With respect to why you talk with the program officer basically they can actually guide you and tell you what areas of interest are of interest to particular agencies or the institute or center here at the NIH. So we have program officer contact information on our website at sbir.nih.gov under the Engage and Connect, under the HHS Agency Contact webpage. And if you have questions about who to contact, just email us at sbir@od.nih.gov, and we'll be happy to answer questions. Next slide, please. As I referred to earlier, the NIH, we have our SBIR STTR website. It's actually quite well designed, if I do say so myself. I didn't do it, so I can't actually say that in all modesty. It's actually very easy to navigate through, and it actually talks about all the entire program, as well as the opportunities. As you can see on the left-hand side, there's a little bit of a column or a drop-down that you can actually select different topics from about funding, applying, review, policy, technical assistance, etc. Okay. Next page, please. Another interesting tool or information tool we have is actually an infographic. This is actually on our website as well, and it's actually quite well designed. It basically is a process of the whole application. It's an infographic of the whole application process, taking you from the first step, which we talk about confirming your small business concerns, your small business as whether it's eligible or not, and then going on to develop an innovative research idea, and then the 5 required registrations, as I was talking to you about before. So if you have an opportunity to go to that infographic, I think you'll find it very, very helpful and very easy to understand as you flow through. Right. Next slide, please. So basically, you all probably are aware that the SBIR and STTR program, these are congressionally mandated programs. So the SBIR, as you can see, stands for the Small Business Innovation Research Program. It's a set-aside for small businesses to engage in federal R&D that has potential for commercialization. As you can see, the set aside in fiscal year 2016 was 3%, but by statute, the fiscal year 2017 set aside is 3.2%. In addition to the SBIR program, we have the STTR program, which stands for the Small Business Technology Transfer Program. That's a set-aside to facilitate cooperative R&D between small business concerns and U.S. research institutions, which with potential for commercialization. As you can see, the fiscal year 2016 to 2017, the set-aside is 0.45%, and that actually stays the same in both years. The next slide, please. So a little bit more about the SBIR versus the STTR. As you can see, the SBIR, the purpose and goals is to stimulate technological innovation using the small business to meet federal R&D needs, foster and encourage participation by minorities and disadvantaged persons in technological innovation, and to increase private sector commercialization innovations derived from federal R&D. And when I noted was talking about the minorities and disadvantaged persons, we also actually should include the women-owned small businesses as well. And then from the STTR, the purpose and goals are slightly different, but actually within the same area, stimulating and fostering scientific and technological innovation through cooperative research between small business concerns and research institutions. And it's supposed to foster technology transfer between the small business concerns and the research institutions. And you can see that this is all part of the Small Business Research and Development Enhancement Act of 1992. And then, of course, the reauthorization, Public Law 11281, which was reauthorized the program through 2017. Next page. Okay. So, as you're probably aware, there are various agencies participate in the SBIR and STTR program. So these are the budgets by agency. The one thing I'll note to you is that, as you can see, the DoD actually has the largest, budget, SBIR budget here. One of the distinctions you'll note that HHS, actually we tend to do our SBIR funding through grants mostly, whereas DoD, NASA, and some of the other agencies tend to do their funding through contracts. Okay. Next slide. So you're aware, NIH is part of HHS, Health and Human Services, as you saw from the previous slide. And, we have shall we say, the lion's share or the large amount of the funding of SBIR of $763 million, and that was in 2016. And our STTR program set aside was about $114 million. But please don't forget that there are other agencies within the department that actually have SBIR programs as well. The CDC at $9 million, ACL has $2.7 million, FDA 1.55 million, and ACF 93.5 thousand. Right. Next slide, please. So as you may already be aware that basically the SBIR and STTR program is a three-phase program. What happens is we look at things as phase one, as you can see, discovery. It's actually when you look at feasibility. So the budget for phase one awards is $150K for SBIR and STTRs. Project period's actually 6 months for an SBIR, 1 year for an STTR. There is some flexibility. We'll get into that in a later slide. With respect to development work under phase two, that's actually full research and development. As you can see, the thing is $1 million for SBIR and STTR over 2 years. That's not $1 million per year, but $1 million over 2 years. And if you go into phase 2B, which is a competing renewal R&D, that is actually for clinical R&D, more complex, research, which may actually include, things to the FDA. So many, but not all of the NIH institutes and centers participate in that, and so the funding actually varies and can vary. It's like $1 million per year up to 3 years. So under phase 2B, you can get up to $3 million under that award. And then, of course, phase 3, commercialization stage, that is actually something NIH generally does not, is not the customer. We're not actually the purchaser. And so what you need to do is consider partnering and exit strategy early as to, to going into phase 3 and actually getting full commercialization. But that's not to say that NIH leaves you without commercialization assistance, which we will talk about a little later in the discussion here. Next slide, please. So one of the first things that you, as a small business, you need to consider is your eligibility. So obviously, it's like it's a U.S. The SBIR is sort of a stimulus program in some ways, and so it's organized. So the small business needs to be organized as a for-profit U.S. business. It needs to be small, 500 or fewer employees, including affiliates. Work must be done in the U.S. with very few exceptions. And individual ownership needs to be greater than 50% U.S. owned by individuals and independently operated, or you can be greater than 50% owned and controlled by other business concerns that are greater than 50% owned and controlled by one or more individuals, or be a concern which is more than 50% owned by multiple venture capital operating companies, hedge funds, private equity firms, or any combination of these. So please note, SBIR eligibility is determined at the time of award. So you can apply, and as long as you actually make the criteria by the time of award, you're actually good to go. As for STTR eligibility criteria, so you need to know that basically what happens is the small business usually comes in with a university, but the applicant is still the small business concern. So what happens here is in the STTR, it's a formal cooperative R&D effort with a minimum of 40% work being done by the small business and a minimum of 30% by the U.S. research institution, and the remaining 30% can be spread between the two. The U.S. research institution itself would be a college or university or other nonprofit research organization or possibly a federal R&D center. Another key about the STTR program is there should be an intellectual property agreement in place between the small business concern and the university so that it's very clear how the IP will be allocated as you move forward in the commercialization, because you don't want the commercialization to be stalled because you're not exactly certain how the IP is going to be managed through the program. Okay, next slide, please. So this slide actually talks about the SBIR and STTR critical differences. As you can see, under SBIR, partnering is permitted, but under STTR, partnering is required with a nonprofit research institution partner, for example, a university, as we talked about earlier. Under the work requirement, SBIRs, you may outsource 33% under phase 1, or you may outsource up to 50% in phase 2. In other words, the small business concern must do 2/3 of the work in phase 1 and at least 50% in phase 2. Under the STTR, the small business needs to do at least 40% of the work, and then the 30% with a research institution partner. Some actually ask if there can be another partner involved as well, and that could actually be part of the research, and they could actually do some of the remaining 30%. As for principal investigator under SBIR, you know that the primary employment needs to be greater than 50%, must be with the small business, the PI needs to be with the small business. Under the STTR, there's more flexibility. The PI may be employed by either the research institution partner or the small business. And as I noted earlier, the award, even in the STTR, even though university or non-research organization is involved, the award is always made to the small business. Okay. Next slide. So I think one of the things I noted was eligibility is determined at the time of award. So, so one of the interesting things that some people think, well, is like because it's the NIH that the PI needs to be a PhD or an MD. Actually, that's not true. It's the PI is not required to have a PhD or MD. They just have to have the expertise to oversee the project scientifically and technically. So some people actually do want to what's called hedge your bet, so to speak, and apply to various agencies with the same same idea. So applications may be for similar projects. And, okay, next slide. So now let's talk about the NIH's. So that was an overview of the SBIR and STTR programs. So let's talk about the NIH program specifics. So if you're coming to the NIH, you need to know what our mission is, because of the fact that basically all work, as you're doing the work, you have to actually be working towards our mission, and that's what we're funding you for. So it's to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and the application of that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. Next slide, please. So as you can see, there are multiple institutes and centers. That's why we use the acronym ICs. institutes and centers at the National Institutes of Health that make up the NIH. That's why it's institutes or plural as opposed to the National Institute of Health. And as you can see, there are four agencies or four institutes or centers that do not actually have funding authority. Fogarty International Center, the Clinical Center, the Center for Information Technology, and the Center for Scientific Review. Next page, please. So the budget allocations, basically with respect to the SBIR and STTR, as we talked about in an earlier slide, it's 700 for fiscal year 2016. It was $763 million for the SBIR program, which was 3% of the budget, and $114 million was at 0.45% for the STTR budget, with a total of $877 million for budget. As you can see, NCI and NIID, NHLBI, and NIGMS tends to, they have the largest shares of those allocations for the SBIR budgets. Next page. Great. So some people actually are curious about what are the grant success rate. In other words, sometimes playing the numbers, as it were. Basically, what is the percentage? what are our chances of getting, going forward? So as you can see under FastTrack, basically it's like the under SBIR, 20%. 20% success rate, and STTR is about 16%. It's very similar. Phase 1 about 15 and 16% respectively. As you can see in the next column, the total phase 2, but that number actually is the sort of, say the average of the next 3 columns. But the total phase 2, basically under SBIR, is about 29%, and phase, excuse me, and the STTR is 36%. And as you can see, regular phase 2, 37%, 36% respectively. Under direct phase 2 and phase 2B, there are no STTRs for those particular years. There was 19% and 38% success rates. Next, please. And as you can see from this, the grant success rates, some people actually do wonder with respect to SBIR and STTR. This basically, talks about with the bar chart you just saw. They ask actually whether it is the chances of getting an award are better if you apply for an STTR versus an SBIR. And all I can say is that there is a slight higher grant success rate for STTRs over SBIRs here. Just a quick note, one of the things, you note that the total phase 2, the percent of success is higher than the phase 1 or the FastTrack, and that actually is probably because of the fact that they've already actually learned the process. They already went through the phase 2 process, and then they're actually familiar and, with how everything works. This could actually also be indicative by the fact that the direct to phase 2, which was noted earlier, is only a 19% success rate, and that's actually people who come in without actually having had a phase 1. Okay, so why don't we go to the next slide here, and we'll talk about reauthorization updates, so you're aware of what's going on here. So basically, it's like if you want, you can look at the our guide notice about the budget updates. But basically what happened under the reauthorization was that we actually have the new levels, should we say, and hard caps are in place. So under an SBIR, under phase 1, you can apply for $150,000, and under the STTR, $150K as well. Under the phase 2, you can do $1 million, or under the STTR, you could also apply for $1 million. Now, the hard caps are basically meaning that what happens is there's some discretion that we can actually go up to 50%, about 50% more, such that the phase 1 SBIR can go up to $225,000 and STTR as well. And under phase 2, we can go to $1.5 million, for each of those. So that would be the hard caps with respect to the funding. And then, of course, there is the possibility, we do realize that some research actually may go beyond that. So what happens is agencies, as we emphasize here, not the applicants, but the agencies, we must apply for a waiver from the SBA for budgets that are over the hard cap of $225,000 for phase 1 or over $1.5 million for phase 2. So basically what happens is we have certain topics, and SBA has to approve a topics list which allows budgets to exceed those hard caps, and so as long as those projects topics are on the list, you can actually apply accordingly for those budgets. Pre-approved topics list is Appendix A in regular topics document, and the approval is good for the 2016 SBIR STTR Omnibus and any funding opportunity announcement that falls on the topic list, including any direct phase 2 FOAs. All right. So venture capital companies, that's actually a new thing. Small business concerns that are majority owned by multiple venture capital operating companies, otherwise known as VCOCs, hedge funds and or private equity firms are now eligible to apply to NIH and CDC SBIR programs. That is actually detailed in the guide notice, as you can see, OD 13-071. Basically, it's like there are also some forms, VCOC forms, available online as well. And note that this can also be used for contracts as well. So one of the other interesting things that you can do is when you're switching between SBIRs and STTRs, you can now switch at phase 2 or 2B to any active, SBIR STTR solicitation. So in other words, like for example, phase 1 STTR awardees may apply for an SBIR STTR phase 2. So for example, if the phase 1 STTR awardee, remember, you had to have a nonprofit research institution with you for the STTR awardee, and perhaps the phase 2, you no longer need the institution, so you would want to switch over to an SBIR perhaps. So and there you can see all the different permutations as what and how you can switch around. And note that not all NIH institutes and centers accept phase 2B applications, which is something I should have emphasized before. Okay. So the next thing we should talk about is solicitation and funding opportunities. This is basically how to find things, how to find opportunities that NIH will fund. So what you need to understand is that the NIH, for you to apply for funding through the NIH, it actually has to be under some sort of funding opportunity announcement. So So if you go to our SBIR website, you can look at the highlighted there, the funding opportunity announcements link, and that'll actually take you to the specific SBIR funding opportunity announcements. If you go to the next page, we can see that what happens for the NIH is we have a parent or Omnibus solicitation, which actually was released in June 3rd, 2016. That was PA 16302 for the SBIR or PA 16303 for the STTR. So these are overarching funding opportunity announcements you can apply under, and what you would do is you would look actually at the topics that we have on the on our website. Please note that unlike some other agencies, we actually have 3 standard due dates. You can apply on September 5th, January 5th, or April 5th of the that fiscal year. And if, by the way, if those dates fall on a weekend or a holiday, it goes, of course, to the next business day, as September 5th actually was on Labor Day, so it went over to September 6th. We also have a contract solicitation. I noted earlier that a majority of the HHS SBIR funding was through grants. Well, we also do have some contract solicitation, and that actually needs to go into the program solicitation, PHS 2017-1. It's for SBIRs only, and you can look up the guide notice. It was released on August 1st, 2016, and that has an application date or closing date of October 21st, 2016, 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So one of the things you actually might want to subscribe to is the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts. What happens is you can subscribe to the listserv there. It releases a weekly, on Fridays, it releases a list of all the funding opportunities that actually came up that particular week. So although I noted that SBIR, STTR funding opportunities are on our SBIR webpage, the NIH Guide provides additional ones when they're first announced. These SBIR opportunities are first announced. You can search for things, and as I said, weekly announcements of other research projects which small businesses may qualify to apply for. So there may not be necessarily SBIR awards on each week, but the fact is small businesses may be eligible to apply for certain funding opportunity announcements that are not SBIR specific. So one of the things you should know is that our ideas were suggested topic areas. That's actually on the, that's on our website as to what you're going to apply for under the Omnibus solicitations. But we, some of the things we actually have are biodefense, biosensors, nanotechnologies, bioinformatics, acousto-optics, optoelectronics, health IT, imaging devices. Next page, please. But the other thing is like we also want to hear from you with respect to, so we're actually interested in your ideas. These are investigator-initiated R&D. Yes, you would still have to apply under the Omnibus, but these could be your ideas that you've come up with that actually fall within the mission of the NIH. So, as I said, the research projects need to be related to the NIH mission and other areas of research within the mission of an awarding component. So certain ICs like NCI cancer, NIDDK, for diabetes and the like. There might be very specific mission things that you are actually interested in doing research in, or you are doing research in, so you could actually move forward and you could talk with a program officer about your ideas and what you're trying to do. And again, what I emphasized in the beginning, talk to a program officer early on. The document that we have, the description and research topics document, it is keyword search. You can do a keyword search in the solicitation just by hitting Control F to see if there are certain areas that we actually do research, that match up with your research interests. As I noted earlier, the NIH guide for grants and contracts, it talks about high priority areas for ICs, various IC participation, and what happens is the opportunity is actually have various due dates, and talk about additional review criteria and the funding and various project periods. So funding opportunity announcements, these are there can be targeted SBIRs or very specific ones that are high priority areas for ICs, and one or multiple ICs can participate in. But you need to be very careful to look at the particulars of that targeted. So this slide here talks about the difference, or some of the highlights that you need to read very carefully between the Omnibus versus the targeted. For example, the due dates. The Omnibus, we talked about standard due dates of September 5th, January 5th, and April 5th. The targeted could use standard or customized due dates. So you need to read those particular funding opportunity announcements. Review. The SBIR and STTR panels are at the Center for Scientific Review here at the NIH. The targeted ones actually have panels at CSR, and also they could have panels at the IC. Now, the Omnibus for the application instructions, you need to follow something called the SF424 R&R and the SBIR STTR application guide and the annotated form set. For targeted, you follow the SF424, the SBIR STTR application guide and the annotated form set, and you need to go through the funding opportunity for any additional instructions that you need to be responsive to, right? So in other words, as you see at the bottom, read the FOA very carefully. So the SBIR STTR program, as you see, it's a three-phase program. We've talked about phase 1, we talked about feasibility. Development is in phase 2, which is full R&D. One of the things we, you probably saw on the chart was something called a FastTrack, where it's basically phase 1 and phase 2, and we also have direct to phase 2. To the right, you see we actually have competing renewal awards under phase 2B, which could be for $3 million for up to 3 years. Additional R&D need to be done, and only some ICs participate in 2B. And of course, the commercialization phase 3, which we talked about, but unfortunately, generally the NIH actually doesn't participate in, or doesn't have any funds for. Next, please. Okay, FastTrack. As you can see under FastTrack, basically what happens under FastTrack is it actually saves you a great deal of time. Some people, some people actually ask about how long does it take for review and the award, and so it can take about, at least 6 months from the time you actually apply to the time you actually get an award. So what happens is if you're trying to go phase 1 and phase 2, the FastTrack actually is incredibly helpful for you to minimize the, shall we say, for lack of a better phrase, downtime between a phase 1 and phase 2. Because if you apply for a phase 1, complete the research, and then apply for a phase 2, the time period for the award can still be at least 6 months for the award of the phase 2. Under the FastTrack, what happens is you simultaneously submit, and there's a review of the phase 1 and 2. And the phase 1 is awarded. If the milestone and aims of phase 1 are assessed by program staff before the phase 2 is awarded and everything is satisfactory, you can actually get the phase 2 awarded within a matter of weeks, as opposed to waiting for the award to be made, reviewed and made, which can be at least 6 months, as I noted earlier. So why don't we go to the next page? Under the directive phase 2, this only applies to SBIR. You can basically bypass the phase 1 grant, but or you have bypassed the phase 1 grant. In other words, you've done feasibility already. And you must have completed the phase 1 type R&D to move directly into a phase 2. There are separate FOAs for this, and not all ICs participate in this. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so basically talking about the Phase 2B Competing Renewal Award. As you go through, you can see the SBIR STTR Phase 2 awardee actually is the technologies require extraordinary time and effort to develop and often require FDA regulatory approval. And as I noted earlier, it's an award of up to $1 million per year for up to 3 years, so it's up to $3 million. ICs that must accept competing renewal applications or be willing to, so you need to actually see that those are the ones, the listed ones actually accept the competing renewal applications. So if you're interested in that, you need to contact the NIH program staff at the particular IC to discuss it. Another program the NIH has is the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program, or the CRP. Basically, we have 2 web materials, as you can see, are available at sbir.nih.gov. You need to contact the program staff to discuss. Not all ICs actually participate in the CRP. There are 2 announcements, the PAR 16-026 in technical assistance and the PAR 16-027 technical assistance and late stage development. Different ICs actually participate in each of those, and the 026 one, I believe, is a 300K cap, and I believe 027 may have a 3 million cap. Okay, next slide, please. So what is the CRP about? Basically what happens is the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program funds work that is not typically supported through the Phase 2 or Phase 2B awards, which could include prepping documents for FDA submission, developing an IP, an intellectual property strategy, IND enabling studies, clinical studies, manufacturing costs, regulatory assistance, and here's something very key, subcontracted work to other institutions, including contract research organizations, or even a combination of the services noted above. So one of the things you should try to key into is take a look at the HHS, the informational webinar we held on December 2nd, 2015. The webinar slides and transcript are actually available at grants.nih.gov/CRP webinar. So you can actually click on the link once if you get a copy of these slides after the talk. As I noted earlier, SBIR STTR, we have standard due dates. What happened was under the old standard due dates were April 5th, August 5th, and December 5th, but now our dates are September 5th, January 5th, and April 5th. So remember those, September 5th, January 5th, and April 5th, and the due date is 5 p.m. your local time. So NIH has gone electronic, so the grant applications and SBIR contract proposals must be submitted electronically now. I think I noted in the very beginning, registrations are required. There are 5 of them, and these can take up to 6 to 8 weeks, so it's best to start those early. As you can see, you need a DUNS number. You need to get into the system for award management. That's actually sam.gov. Grants.gov, you need to register with that. ERA Commons, which a company and all the PDs and PIs need to register. And the SBA company registry at sbir.gov. So there's also some helpful NIH grants registration infographics that we have available if you click on the link here. And please note, for contracts, you would submit proposals through the electronic contract proposal submission website, which is also a link that was provided in these slides. Okay, next. Now this is actually, Assist is a new submission option. Basically what happens is you can actually apply, fill out forms and such, applying system to system, or you can use downloadable forms. But Assist is actually, shall we say, well, it's a great assistance mechanism in making certain that most errors for NIH applications are caught early and bypassed or addressed early on. So why don't you go to the next slide? And so basically, new FOA apply buttons. You can apply online using Assist or apply using downloadable forms. We've actually heard quite a number of great things about Assist, making the whole process easier. So it's something you should actually look into. And as I said, you can actually see more about that on our website. Okay. So the next slide. Go ahead. the next slide. Basically, some people actually get concerned about the fact that they may have missed the deadline by a few minutes or such, So what you have to read is the revised NIH late submission policy. Basically, if you would note to you that we're saying that registrations take 6 to 8 weeks. So if you're actually doing your registration for one of those 5 required registrations the day before an application due date, then unfortunately, you would be you wouldn't be able to get it in time. Basically, the notice issued on December 17, 2014, talks about our late submission policy. There is a 2-week window of consideration after the application due date for all grant applications. SBIR STTR previously had a 1-week window, and this supersedes the old policy. So there is a 2-week window, for explanations as to why your submission was late. But best to actually get it in on time. We talked about, briefly, some of the goals of the SBIR program. So one of the things is the women-owned small business. What is a women-owned small business? And a firm must be at least 51% owned and controlled by 1 or more women and primarily engaged by 1 or more women who must be U.S. citizens. The firm must be small in its primary industry in accordance with SBA size standards for that industry, and the small business must self-certify on the SF424 R&R application form. So that is actually one of the minorities or groups that actually the program, the SBIR purpose wants to actually foster more participation with. And also the socially and economically disadvantaged business. We're also looking towards fostering that as well. The firm must be 51% or more owned and controlled by 1 or more disadvantaged persons. The disadvantaged person must be socially disadvantaged and economically disadvantaged, and the firm must be small according to SBA size standards as noted before, and must self-certify by registering their business in the System for Award Management, otherwise SAM. Okay. So a little bit about the NIH peer review process here at the, so we actually have 2 levels of review at the NIH. We actually have it at the peer review process, and it's actually at program. So as you can see, when you initiate your research idea, with program staff, then the small business concern actually confirms their eligibility. Then you submit the grant application electronically to the NIH. Goes through the area-grants.gov help desk is basically who you would confer with. The NIH Center for Scientific Review assigns it to an IC, and basically it's like, it goes to the referral office. The scientific review group evaluates the scientific merit of the application, the technology. So that's actually been done by the scientific review officer, overseen by the scientific review officer. It goes to the advisory council or board to recommend approval, and that goes to program staff. And then the IC or program staff prepare the funding plan for the IC director, and that's being handled by program staff and grants management. IC then allocates funds, and the grantee conducts the research. Okay. So timelines, due dates, as I noted, September 5th, January 5th, and April 5th. And the scientific review, the months actually correspond to those. Council review, actually, in the 3rd column there, and the earliest award date, as you can see, September 5th. So the earliest award date would be March. So that's about 6 months. Okay. Go to the next thing. So some of the common application problems actually with respect to when you're applying, so you need to consider this when you want to be successful in your applications, is that there's no significance. You need to make certain that it's an important problem. Unimportant problems, unconvincing case for commercial potential or societal impact is actually, will actually obviously, be against you. Inadequately defined test of feasibility. Another thing is a lack of innovation. If you have diffuse, superficial, or unfocused research plan, they seem very obvious, I guess, to you all. Questionable reasoning and experimental approach. In other words, a failure to consider potential pitfalls and alternatives. Very importantly, if you lack experience with essential methodologies, or unfamiliar with relevant published work, or unrealistically large amount of work is proposed for what you're trying to get done. So these are all things you need to consider. So as you remember, hopefully you remember from the very first slide, the most important piece of advice, talk to an HHS program officer about your application and submit early. The program officer's contact information, we have it on our SBIR.nih.gov website. Questions about who to contact, just email us at sbir@od.nih.gov. That's very important for you, and we're here to help. And let's see now. So one of the other keys here is we're talking about transitioning to the marketplace. As I noted earlier about the Phase 3 commercialization, we don't actually fund Phase 3 through the SBIR program, but that's not to say that we don't actually have technical assistance programs. So we do have technical assistance programs that help companies cross the valley of death, basically, to get to that commercialization. We actually have the Niche Assessment Program and the Commercialization Accelerator Program, which I'm in. So I want to go to the next slide there. So as you can see, the Niche Assessment Program is available to Phase 1 awardees. It helps to identify other uses of your technology, determines competitive advantages, develops marketing entry strategy. One of the things what you would do is you would actually apply to the program as long as there's availability. There's spaces, you apply for the slots. As soon as you get your Phase 1 awardee, you should actually try to look into that. And what it'll do is we contract with Foresight Science and Technology, basically, and they will provide, shall we say, a marketing package for you, actually, doing the research for the market entry and as I said, looking up the competitive advantage and other uses of technology. Now for Phase 2 awardees is the Commercialization Accelerated Program, or the CAP program. Basically, there's various things that encompassed in the CAP program. We have assistance in strategic business planning, FDA requirements, CMS, reimbursement issues, technology evaluation, manufacturing issues, patenting and licensing issues. We actually help build strategic alliances, or teach you to, facilitate investor partnerships, and individualized mentoring and consulting. One of the things I like to say, actually, with respect to the niche, in some ways niche, I mean, they're quite excellent in providing the marketing, and that's sort of giving you a fish or giving you a marketing assessment, whereas the Commercialization Accelerator Program basically teaches you how to commercialize, or helps you to further advance what you already know about commercialization. Okay, next slide. So I would be remiss if I did not tell you that there is an NIH SBIR-STTR Conference, or I should say HHS SBIR-STTR Conference, this November in Orlando, Florida. It's from November 15th through the 17th. It's a 3-day conference, and it has 3 tracks, basically, of incredible, information for you. And the NIH, the program officers in grants management and our office will be there to answer questions, so you can register and you can actually sign up for one-on-ones, as are the CDC will be there as well, and other other relevant offices under HHS to discuss very important topics and the like, and answer your questions. For more information, you can contact our office. As you can see, our director, or the lead coordinator here is Matt Portnoy, Rob Vincent, myself, JP Kim, Betty Royster is our communication specialist, and our in-house statistician is Dr. Julie Beaver. So it's very important for you to get connected, so it would be really great if you subscribe to our listserv. So you can email the listserv at list.nih.gov and basically subscribe. As I noted earlier, the NIH Guide for Grants and Contracts is a really fantastic way for you to keep apprised of any opportunities that that are SBIR related, but also other not SBIR awards, but other funding opportunities that a small business could apply for. You can also follow us on Twitter to keep up with what's going on. Read our NIH SBIR-STTR notable successes, so you can sort of see what the pathway to success for some earlier small business concerns have been. So connect with us, and you can, as I noted earlier, email us at sbir@od.nih.gov, and we'll be happy to answer your questions there. And on that, I know that was a long and actually rather fast path actually to discussion, but thank you for participating in the session of Succeeding at SBIR, and we look forward to if you have any questions, why don't we try to take care of those. Alyssa, would you like to sort of moderate the question?
Sure. Okay, so as we were talking, we had a couple questions come in. So the first one was, can a Phase 1 awardee apply to PAR 16-027 during the Phase 1, or is this a separate grant not related to the initial Phase 1?
It would be a separate, and actually I believe that would actually be more like a Phase 2. Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So the next thing is a couple of people actually asked if we're going to share our presentation slides, which we are. After the presentation is over with, we'll post them on YouTube. You will have the full recording, and we will also send out a PDF of the slides. Lots of links on the slides that are extremely helpful, so you will have those available to you as well. Can anyone help with SBC the small businesses self-certify, or is it in the initial or who is the initial contact for SBC certifying? I'm guessing that's it in relation to the SAMS process. Can you comment on that at all?
Yeah, it sounds like actually what you might want to do is you might want to actually go to the SBA.gov website, and take a look at the, basically the various information things that they have there with respect to finding out what you need to be eligible and how you need to register for various things.
Okay, excellent. Thank you for that. Another question is, does the NIH assist in getting FDA approval or guidance?
Well, not directly. Basically what happens is, I would say that basically what would, for example, our annual conference, the one in Orlando, there will be FDA representatives there, to speak with. And I think that basically what you'd need to do is you as a small business would need to engage the FDA directly. However, the other thing I would note to you is that part of our Commercialization Accelerator program, if you're in Phase 2 and you get into Commercialization Accelerator program, there is a track, it's Regulatory and Reimbursement Training track, which actually helps to advise, and mentor small businesses in trying to get regulatory approval, and they can actually learn about how to interact with the FDA. So that's through a contract that we run, the Accelerator program, so we wouldn't necessarily talk to the FDA on your behalf, but we can actually, through that program and the mentors that are assigned to you as part of the program, you would probably learn through that process.
Excellent. Okay, what is the definition of socially disadvantaged?
Socially disadvantaged, I would actually need to refer you, I don't have the explicit definition, but I'd actually refer you to the SBA.gov website because it actually has socially disadvantaged, and it has women-owned businesses, clearly defined and fully explained.
Okay, excellent. And I'll reply a link to that comment in the box afterwards. Mm-hmm. Can you get an extension to the NIH SBIR STTR contracts? I believe you mentioned that.
I'm sorry, an extension?
Yes. If actually, no, maybe you didn't cover that. An extension to the contract. If you don't complete all of your work within, let's say, the year of the award, can you get an extension?
Oh yeah, well obviously what you do is you would actually talk with the program officer, or the contracting officer I should say, with respect to the if you're not getting things done. And so basically if you're not being able to get your work done within the period of performance, I think that's basically what they're saying. If they need additional time, you need to talk with your contracting officer about that particular issue. There could be circumstances where you could get an extension where there may be an opportunity for a no-cost extension, but again, it would be, fact-specific to the, to that particular project, I believe.
Okay, excellent. Can a PI be partially funded by the small business and the research institute simultaneously?
Yeah, I believe that actually does happen. I've had some people talk to me about that, so yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, perfect. Are there any additional NIH follow-on funding sources? I'm guessing this is relating to kind of a gap fund or something like that. I think you pretty much covered that with the
CRP.
CRP, yeah, right?
Yeah, the Commercialization Readiness Pilot Program is probably the closest, I think.
Okay, perfect. It looks like that's all of the questions. If anybody has anything else, just go ahead and type it into the chat box. We got another couple minutes here. In the meantime, any other points or anything else you'd like to cover, JP? I think the most important takeaway is to get in contact, get participating early, get those registrations done. That's the hardest part.
Well, actually, it's and again, like you said, talking with the program officer. For example, if you have an idea sort of in the cancer research area, it's you need to actually talk with the the NCI program officer about your research interests. So basically, that'll actually help to help solidify what you're going to do with your application. And basically, don't be afraid to talk with the program officer. I like to say they're your friend. Basically, yeah. We're trying to help you move forward, because basically, if your research is actually there to help, further the mission of that particular IC, and of course the NIH overall, of course, that's in our interest too. So we want to make certain that that research goes forward, and that's why programs like the commercialization accelerator, why we invest in the CRP, the Commercialization Accelerator Program, the Niche Assessment Program. These are to help to get those products out there, those further developed and out there.
Okay, I think that is about it. If anybody else comes across any other questions, then go ahead and shoot us an email, and we'll relay those over to JP. And besides that, thank you for joining us today. We hope to see you at our other Succeeding at SBIR sessions. And thank you so much, JP, for doing this presentation today.
Thank you, and thank you, everyone, and hopefully we'll see you all in Orlando. Okay, take care now.
Take care.